No, man, but you got to keep going. What am I going to do, quit? That's not an option. You got to keep on keeping on. Life's a garden, dig it? You make it work for you. You never give up, man. That's my philosophy.
Hey gardeners, how's it growing? I hope everyone's doing well this week. We're out this week hardening off all of our pepper plants that have been growing indoors for the last few months. And they're all doing all right. A little bit of leaf curl, a little bit of shock going on, of course, but all in all, doing really well. We've got lots and lots of pepper varieties to get planted out into our garden here in the next week. All right, let's get growing. All right. Welcome all you garden enthusiasts and passionate plant people to Let's Get Growing, your gardening live cast right here on the Urban Gardener channel. And we've got a great show for you today. So thank you all so much for joining with us here today. We've got joining with us a little bit later on in the show, Vikram Baliga, the plant professor. He's going to be with us a little bit later. We're going to talk all about some garden myths and different things that he does in the gardening world. He's a plant scientist at the Texas Tech University. I'm really looking forward to talking to him all about plant science, soil science, all sorts of great fun things that we're going to get into here later on in the show. And then here in just a few minutes, we'll have joining with us Alexis from theUrbanGardenher. She'll be joining with us here in a little bit for our Are You Following Me segment. So definitely stay tuned for these wonderful, awesome guests that we've got here on the show today. Yes, awesome. And also, too, just to remind everybody, we do also have our show on Sunday. We do our Sunday edition. So we're here both Saturday and Sundays, Pacific time, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And tomorrow we're going to have a gardening roundtable on our Sunday edition. And joining with us is going to be Tom Spellman and Charles Malky. Tom Spellman's from Dave Wilson Nursery, and Charles Malky is our sponsor, IV Organic. And these guys both do a lot with urban orchards and trees and growing fruit trees and all sorts of things. So we're going to just get into a real discussion about managing fruit trees. We've got several different fruit trees here around in my gardens, as you'll see in our videos and different things. We've got peach tree, pear tree, apples, some figs. We've got a bunch of different things that we've got growing all in containers. So I'm definitely going to kind of grill them on some container care for some trees. But even if you do have really great trees in the ground and all of that as well too, you want to tune in and find out a little bit more about any sort of questions you might have about tree care or any of that sort of stuff as well too. And then also I want to let everybody know next Saturday we'll have joining with us Scott Head. He's gonna be returning to the channel. He was one of our first guests that we had on the show when we got started last season, so he'll be back on the show with us this year. His channel is Black Gumbo Southern Gardening, and Scott Head's one of those guys I've been following for many years, and really enjoy his content and what he does in just backyard gardening, and he has really great gardening videos and all of that as well too. So it'll be great to talk with Scott again here on the show and have him back. So I encourage everybody come and join with us next Saturday. And then the Saturday after that, that's going to be June 8th. And I'm going to go ahead and start promoting this show right now and right now today, because I am super excited. And I'll just say, and I've talked about this, we've mentioned this future guest on the show before, but when I started this whole idea for the Let's Get Growing show. I had a list of people I wanted to have on the show. I had a list of these kind of dream guests who would be at the top of the list that we just, if we, we climbed to the top and we got the best guest we could get, who would that person be? And we got them coming up on the show June 8th. This is really exciting. We're going to be having with us Mark Valencia from Self-Sufficient Me, and all the way down in Australia is going to join with us on the show. And I'll just say why I'm really excited about having Mark on the show too. Not only the fact that he has one of the biggest and best gardening channels on YouTube, and I've been following Mark since he practically got started on YouTube. I remember he probably had around as many subscribers as we have on our channel today, around 15,000 subscribers or so. And I just, it's been fun following along with him on his journey and watching his successes on YouTube and what he's been able to do with his channel throughout all of these years. And I finally get a chance to talk to him one-on-one with all of you guys. So again, that's why we're promoting this show so early. I usually only let you know about next week's guest, but we're letting you know a couple of weeks ahead of time about Mark Valencia from Self-Sufficient Me joining with us here. It's going to be great conversation. And another cool thing about this discussion we're going to have with Mark is that usually we've had like James Prigioni on the channel. We've had John Kohler on the show. We've had a couple of other really big guests that we, that have been on our big guest list that we've been able to get on the show. And each of those guests, we've had to do a pre-recorded interview. Joe Lample, one that we were supposed to show the other week, we'll end up showing you here in a few other weeks, in a couple of weeks here, but we've had to pre-record those, and that just means that we don't get to talk with and discuss things with our guest and the live audience. And this show with Mark is going to be live. He's going to join with us live, so I'm really excited about that. So that's really awesome, and really can't wait for that here in a couple of weeks. So definitely mark your calendars for June 8th and come and join with us to watch the interview with Mark Valencia from Self-Sufficient Me, and bring your questions too, so you can ask him some questions as well too, because I know a lot of people really love and enjoy his channel and everything he does. So definitely come and check that out. All right, so we got a lot of things going on again too. We talked about this last week as well too. It's just that time of year. There are so many things growing on in the garden right now. We've been preparing for things, just like I showed in the clip as we opened the show. We've had our peppers indoors for weeks and weeks and weeks. We started those back, I think, late February, early March. We started all of our peppers, and they've been just growing indoors, waiting for our last frost date all this time under the lights, in our couple of different light stations that we have here, and I've showed you over the weeks. But now they're outdoors. We're hardening them off. We did that process with all of our tomatoes the week before, so we're getting those out into the garden spaces as well too. I didn't quite hit my goal when it came to tomatoes too, and some of our starts ended up being kind of really rough. But one of the things that's really great about tomatoes is that they can kind of handle that. I mean, it's one of those things that you get started, and I found over the years, starting plants early for the garden spaces, is that tomatoes are really resilient young plants, and they just continue to grow. And again, we just bury them deep and cut off the bad leaves as they happen, and they just grow into these really nice full plants and start taking off here in the next few weeks. So they've already been in the ground and are already starting to respond now to the fact that they're in the ground, and I'm sure their roots are going to start going crazy over the next few weeks, and we'll see some really awesome tomato plants in some weeks to come. But that's our goal this next week, though, is to take care of those peppers, get those out in the ground. I've got hopefully I'm working on my second batch of seeds for eggplants. I got a couple of varieties in a couple of packages and tried seeding those out a few weeks ago, and I didn't get anything, and nothing came up. So I went and got some more. So I'm on my second batch. Hopefully we're going to get those popping up here soon. and have those in the garden too as well too, because I really love, like I say all the time on the show, I love growing eggplants. I don't really like to eat them. I've got friends who love the eggplants, but they're such a wonderful plant and a really awesome looking plant for the garden spaces. And so I hope our eggplants get going. If not, I'll have to do some searching around in some of our local nurseries to see if I can find some eggplants uh, already started and get those put out maybe too as well. I like to try as much as I can to get things started myself if I can. There are a couple of tomato varieties. I was at a nursery this last week and I saw a couple of tomato varieties that I didn't get started with my tomato seeds. So I did pick those up. So I do have a few extra tomato plants other than the ones I started from seed, from ones that I got out in the nursery that I saw. So that's pretty cool too. Let's see here. Let's catch up with everybody in the chat right now real quick here. I'm just talking on and on about all of this sort of stuff here. Definitely let's start with back on the show through a couple of different snafus. I don't know how and what happened, but last Sunday we surely missed our moderator, Jay Dixon. Jay joining us from Ontario, Canada, the greatest moderator on YouTube. It's just wonderful to have you back with us, Jay. Surely missed you when it came to last Sunday's show for sure, definitely. So it's great to have you back there. Let's see here. We got Serena Norell joining with us. We've got Grows at Alaska. Awesome. Great to have you back on the show with us here. Sam. Awesome to have you back with us, Sam. Awesome. Excellent. Connie joining with us there. Great to have you back with us, Connie. Awesome. Jersey Girl back on the show. Jersey Girl caught me here too this midweek here. Me and Jay were doing a little test because of our issue we had with the moderation this last Sunday. So we did a little test this week, and Jersey Girl jumped on there and caught me there for a few minutes in a live stream no one will ever see. Right on. It was great to see you there. So great to see everybody. It looks like everybody's having a great fun discussion here. Awesome. Oh, Rob joining with us here from the UK. Rob's Allotment Gardening. Awesome to see you, Rob. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're having a great evening in the UK. Let's see here. John Jude with us. He says he's joining us from mid-Ohio. He says corn is 9 inches already. He's already got his corn in the ground. That's awesome. I'm going to start doing corn this next week. We're going to get corn going this next week. In fact, most of our corn, I'm going to do a little bit of some corn in our alleyway garden. And then most of our corn is going to be grown over at my friend Mike's place, where we have these really big 20 by 40 foot plots. We've got a lot of stuff already growing in there. I know I got to get some videos made so you guys can see some of these spaces. I'm going to work on that this week. It's definitely my goal, so you can catch up with what we've got growing on in our garden spaces right now. But over there, we've got bunches of potatoes already growing. Garlic's looking great for coming out possibly here in another 3-4 weeks. So we're looking for that to happen. Scapes are just about ready to start popping up here. So we're getting there on our garlic. So definitely awesome. Going to be a great, awesome garlic harvest this year. So lots and lots of things growing on. I do have to share here before we take our break here real quick. One quick story though, because I go out and I walk around the garden spaces before we get started with this show. And one of the fun things about our garden spaces, as many people know, is that we grow on alleyways. I go right out my side door. I'm right in an alleyway, and we grow right along the alleyways. Me and a neighbor of mine as well too. So we've got all these great alleyway spaces, and we get a lot of people who walk through, and so I'm constantly meeting people and talking about the stuff that we've got growing on. I think it's one of the great fun things about the garden spaces that we have here is that they're so, they're so public forward that, I'm constantly getting people walking through and constantly able to engage with people and share with them about what we're doing and what we've got growing on here in our gardens and all of that. And I was out before the show and hanging out, checking out some things. And then I heard this guy come around the corner through the other alleyway. He came around the corner and he was talking to someone, and I was like looking, but I didn't see anyone else around, and didn't really realize that he was talking to his cat. Now, everybody knows I've got my cats. I've got George and I've got Dexter, my alley cats, and George was running around somewhere. I'm not sure where he was at the moment, but then I noticed this little cat walking up and just walking towards me like it's no big deal, and the gentleman walks towards me and says, oh, lets me know about his cat and everything. And I was like, oh wow. I said, did he get loose? And he's like, oh no, I'm walking my cat. And I was like, you're walking your cat? And this is literally right out here walking, and the cat's walking along, and he just calls the cat, and the cat just follows. We're not talking a leash or anything like you would see with dogs or anything like that. This guy had his cat just calling the cat, and the cat would keep near him, would check out some things. In fact, got up and checked out our catnip in our little cat garden that we have in the alleyway, and checked that out a little bit as we were talking, and then kind of stood over and sat and waited for him while he was talking to me to get moving on. And then they went on down the next alleyway, and the cat just followed along with him. And he told me that that's their routine, and they just walk around. He's new to the neighborhood. He's had the cat for a while, so they're getting used to this new area and walking through. And he was telling me how much he likes my cat, because the cat doesn't bother him too much or bother the other cat that much, and they can walk through our alleyway and all of that. And I says, well, yeah, you're certainly welcome to come through every time. I just think this is completely fascinating. I have never seen but I've seen people now walk cats with leashes before, but I've never seen anybody walk a cat like they would a dog and just have them follow along as they're walking through down the alleyways in our city. And I just thought that was amazing, and definitely a fun story. Not quite gardening, but a fun story that I thought I just had to share with everybody. Jersey Girl says, my cat used to follow the kids down to the bus stop. Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, George will follow me around the alleyway. He'll do all the things. He loves to hang out with me when I'm working in different parts of the garden spaces and all of that. He'll roll around. He'll try to get in my way sometimes, but for the most part, he just really likes to hang out with me. But the idea of just taking him down through the neighborhoods and walking him around, and that he's just going to follow me is just insane. I mean, after they left and I just watched him walk on to the next alleyway, and the cat just kept following like no big deal. And they just kept going on. I just couldn't believe it. And all I could do was look over to George, who was just standing there. I was like, what? I said, what's your deal? Why can't you do that? But yeah, that's just really, really amazing. Let's see here. Okay, let's see here. Sorry, everybody. Let's get going. I gotta move on here. Let's jump into our first break real quick, and when we get back, we'll meet up with our first guest in our Are You Following Me segment. So be sure to stick with us here. We'll see you in just a moment. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. One application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah from Sarah's Seed Shop here with this week's trivia question. Which of the following pH ranges is best for most plants? A, 2 to 3, B, 4 to 5, C, 6 to 7, or D, 8 to 9? We'll be back with the answer a little later in the show.
All right, all right. So you know what range is best for most plants, pH plants? Jump into the comment section there. Let us know. All right, all right. Let's see here. I wanted to see. Rob's allotment said one of our cats used to sleep next to me, next to the pillow. Yes, yes, that's awesome. Yeah, my one cat I raised from a kitten, he was cool like that, but then he moved on. Now he likes to live with the neighbor better than he does me. So cats are cats, though. That's the fun thing about them, though, too. Awesome. All right, so let's meet up with our first guest here, joining us from Washington, D.C.
Are you following me? Are you following me, dude?
All right, all right. So this week we are following Alexis B from @theUrbanGardenher. How are you doing, Alexis? Thank you so much for joining with us today.
Thank you. I'm great. Thank you for having me. I know we're like long overdue for this interview. We were supposed to do it last year, but I had a baby. So thank you.
Yeah, you had the perfect excuse. It's really awesome. Though it's great to have you here. I've been following you and your Instagram and the things you've been doing because when my channel's the Urban Gardener.
Yeah.
And so I noticed your channel early on, the Urban Gardener. And I thought that was a great way of word play on that. And I'm really glad that I caught your page there on Instagram too, because it's been really fun to follow. I really enjoy watching people who do urban gardening and urban garden spaces. And you're growing right out of Washington, D.C., right?
Right out of Washington, D.C. Not like the, outskirts in the suburbs. We're in the heart of the city in Washington, D.C. And yeah.
Right on, right on. So tell us a little bit about your garden spaces, though, or what kind of is this? Apartment balconies? Do I know a little bit. We'll tell the audience, but
sure,
backyard kind of.
Yeah, so we are actually we were blessed when we moved to DC some years ago with a property that had a yard. Now, for those that are familiar with DC, like it's very urban, a lot of townhouses, apartments, and not too many yards. And so we were blessed to be able to get a backyard, and it's spacious, but of course, my husband's like, we're not gonna put plants everywhere in the yard. You have to have some place to actually enjoy like sitting and entertaining. So, but we have it fenced in. So basically I'm growing in our backyard on one side of the fence that gets all the sunlight exposure. We're growing in hanging baskets, wall planters on our deck, grow bags. So I heard you talking about your alley. So I have this carved out area where I called grow bag alley that I, put all of my grow bags in a line. Actually just added a birdie's raised bed there. But yeah, so this all the container gardening, raised bed gardening awesome. In our backyard.
So you're using your alleyway space as well too then?
Well, not outside of the fence, but I call it inside of our home. But yeah, to be honest, there is an empty lot next to us that I could grow. Well, it's not ours we don't own it. So,
Right.
but I'm sure whoever does wouldn't mind if we planted some, vegetables and some flowers for the neighborhood.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I love those types of things. We've set up and have a few different community gardens that have been set up and all of that too. And I kind of love that idea of being able to use kind of unused city spaces in order to kind of bring people together in gardening as well too. And if you even do that or get something started yourself, you just go over there and start planting some things. You'll find people will come, and
Yeah.
you'll end up with a community garden in the long run. Might be something you want to get trying. So, all right, let's jump back a little bit here and talk a little bit about your garden story. So everybody's always got, I find, a pretty interesting gardening story. So where does yours begin? When did you first start growing and gardening?
Yeah, so it started, I was introduced to gardening as a little girl. My
Excellent.
grandfather is a farmer in southern Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, for those that are familiar with Valdosta, Georgia. It's close to Jacksonville, Florida, but he grew everything. Like I've seen him grow, collard greens, peas, corn. He made his own grits from corn, like just all the things. And so, for years I used to see that and, never thought like I myself would be a gardener, but, I just thought that that's just what, older people, people down south do with larger yards. And then we bought our home in DC and, we're blessed to have a backyard. And I, first we started off with a deck and I just never thought that we would be able to grow in anything. So I started on my windowsill. So I just tried some herbs on our windowsill before we even had our backyard, the fenced in area. And I saw that I was able to germinate some herb seeds. And I was like, oh, wow, something's living. We can actually eat. And just the whole concept of like growing your own food is what really just, seeing my grandparents do it. My grandfather would, grow things in the field. My grandmother would, cook everything, preserve it, and we would just be eating things all year long. So the idea of growing your own food just really just attracted me to that, starting a garden in our backyard. So again, started the herbs, was successful. Then I, branched out to starting to grow in containers on our deck. And although they weren't like, super huge, it was like something. I had a tomato, I had a cucumber, and I was like, oh, wow, like this is where our food comes from. So then I just expanded to our backyard, and my husband, he's very handy, and he built some raised beds for me from wood that actually rotted a few years. So we had to invest in the metal raised beds back there. And I've just been, growing everything I can that whatever space that I have. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Again, too, that's a very similar story to mine in a way. I have a, house plant background. My mother loved them and everything, but it wasn't until later on in my adulthood when I first had a balcony in an apartment and then I got a cucumber plant from a friend and grew this cucumber for that first time. And it was harvesting those cucumbers, eating those first cucumbers that was just kind of a spark hit me. Again, like you said, oh, this is where our food comes from. We grow this stuff. And it was like, I knew, this stuff, but you don't really know it until you grow some yourself and you have that experience and really empower yourself to be able to grow your own food, right?
Absolutely. It's very empowering to be able to know that you can control like what food you grow in your home. Just super, super. I'm just very blessed to be able to like, pick up this skill and not just, just it's a hobby, but it's also just something I love to do. Yeah.
And like you said, you got these young children, which is something that's going to be great to bring them up around and raise them around these sort of things as well too. So I think that's really awesome. So what are some of these things you've got growing in this garden space this year? You got any?
So every year something new, something.
Yeah. What's new this year?
More. So I'm growing all your staples like tomatoes and peppers. Lettuce, I'm still harvesting, getting to the end of that season. Spring is kind of ending and we're getting into summer. Beans, I just harvested some pole beans today. I'm sorry, bush beans. Herbs daily or weekly so that I can, have continuous growth from those. But what new I'm starting, potatoes. I have my brassicas, which is like my cauliflower. I had harvested some broccoli, cabbage. What else? Lots of stuff. But the new things that I'm growing this year, I'm trying peanuts, which is,
Okay. Yeah, those are fun.
yeah, I've seen some other gardeners grow peanuts, so I'm kind of curious about that. What
Yeah,
else?
those are just so interesting in how they grow. They're one of those ones that you just not typical in how they produce the peanuts ultimately. How they grow and they drop them into the ground from up top. I mean, it's just amazing. That's one of the things that one of those plants that when I first started gardening, I first started growing, that was just blown away by. I was like, man, this is really, really one of those, one of those plants that really shows you how amazing plants are and what they do.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this works. I've seen, how they like drop down, and so I'm just trying to
Yeah,
make sure I have enough space for that. I don't know. I'm considering a container, but I need a large enough one so they can like have space to grow. But
yeah,
um,
definitely.
yeah,
But
the other
we all know peanuts. Everybody knows a peanut, but how many times do you think about how it actually grows and
right,
what the plant does to produce that peanut? And then when you find that out and figure that out, that's just really, that's really great. One of the more amazing ones. And yeah, you probably want a little space for them to grow
yeah,
outward and to drop them down into. But
okay,
yeah, definitely a fun
yeah.
plant. Really fun plant.
Another tomatillos because
Oh
while I
yeah.
was pregnant with my second baby last year, I just had this craving for Mexican food and for salsa verde. And I was like, I have to
Yeah.
grow those. I have to grow tomatillos.
Yeah.
That's a new one. And then also eggplant. I've never grown eggplant, but I started a couple from seed. We
Mhm.
don't really eat eggplant like as often, but I just wanted to just learn how to grow it. So I'm trying that
Yeah.
as well. Lemongrass is a new one that I'm growing. I'm getting more into like, medicinal herbs and trying to like grow more
Yeah.
herbs, expand that, and chamomile. Yeah. So,
Yeah, herbs are fun. Herbs are great.
mhm.
Eggplant, I talk about this one all the time is again, I don't eat eggplant. I mean, I'll try some stuff. If somebody makes something and it's
Uh-huh.
new to me, I'll give it a shot. I'll definitely try it for sure. And I've
Yeah.
had a few friends who've done that with eggplant that I've given them to. But for the most part, it's not really my thing, but I love the plants. The
Yeah.
plants are just really awesome. Those fruits are so cool and they
Yeah.
just make this great like aesthetically pleasing, just looks nice and beautiful and colorful in your garden. And that's one of the things I like to do too. So I like to grow food, but I also like to have some of those fun ones and those things that really make things look really, really kind of nice in the garden, And I think eggplants are a real highlight of the garden.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I
Mhm.
definitely, this is my first time growing them, so I'm curious to see how they grow, but it's awesome to hear. Like eggplant parmesan is the only thing I can think of that comes to mind as far as what I plan to do
Mhm.
with them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that was literally the only thing I knew that you could do with eggplant when I first heard of and thought of growing eggplants myself. But again, come to learn there's a lot more, but it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right on, right on. So, out of all the things you've grown and all this time you've been gardening and all of that, what are some of your biggest gardening challenges?
Pest.
Yeah, I mean, being in the city, there's got to be some challenges too. Maybe more specific to even urban gardening, right?
Yeah, so specific to urban gardening, a lot of gardeners, which I and people that are interested in gardening in the city, have expressed, concerns about gardening in the city because of the rodents. I haven't had too many of those in our backyard. Like I've seen like field mice, like, there's holes that you can see in the soil, and you can see them scurrying around. But I haven't had too many issues as far as them eating my vegetables. But the squirrels have been like My fruits, I have not been able to harvest a whole lot of berries because, they usually get to them before I do, which reminds me, I have some strawberries that I saw this morning that I forgot to harvest. So hopefully they're still there. Um, but squirrels is something, there's a lot of them where we're at, which they're probably everywhere in the country. But pests are my challenges. Another thing is growing in a small space corn, because corn, as you're probably familiar, like corn, you have to have a lot of them near each other so that pollination can happen. The tassels can get the pollen and everything. And like, it's a challenge for me because it's hard to find space to grow a lot of corn. Unless you dedicate a specific raised bed, which I don't like to do because I, want to grow other things. So I've had challenges with growing corn in my raised beds, and I'm actually trying to grow them in grow bags this year. I've seen someone, the okra lady on Instagram, I've seen her grow them in grow bags and hand pollinate the corn.
Yeah.
So that is something I'm trying to do to, I guess, work around as far as like the small space. And, the city is trying to grow corn. If you see these big corn stalks, like I know my neighbors are like, what is she growing over there in that backyard in DC? That corn, I've grown sunflowers, the mammoth sunflower hanging over the fence. And people are probably seeing me like down the street, like, what is this? What does she have in her backyard? But I just find, trying to find ways to grow things that you typically wouldn't grow in the city in my little backyard, which is, that's a challenge for me.
Yeah. Again, too, like you mentioned, with pests and animals and things like that, that's pretty typical, especially in the city. They're all out constantly looking for food. And if you're just growing it for them right there, it's really, tempting. But one of the things I was going to, I saw suggested and I thought was kind of an interesting idea for squirrels, and maybe it would work for other animals as well too. And maybe even in an urban space, is getting some of these fake rubber snakes and put some fake rubber snakes around in some places where they're where they're hitting up your stuff. Put some fake rubber snake right there and see if maybe that deters them or not. I don't know. Haven't had to test it out or anything. I just read about this recently and I thought it was a pretty interesting idea. So I think I might give it a shot with a couple of spaces of mine too, just to test it. But maybe give that a shot.
Yeah, if I wasn't afraid, see, that might not just deter all the pests, it might deter me as well if I see a fake snake and think it's real.
Well, at least it's you putting it out there, so it's there, right?
I'll forget. I know I'll forget. Like
it's so great, huh? I know. Right on. But definitely awesome. Let's see. So what's some of your favorite things to grow in your garden?
I enjoy growing broccoli. Like, I just think it is so cool how broccoli grows. Like, and that has been one of the challenges for me to grow up until like the last couple of years. I've been able to grow it successfully. And I just think it's so cool to grow broccoli and to be able to eat it fresh. It just is nothing like it. I just, simply just roast it. Something else I enjoy growing. Tomatoes. I love fried green tomatoes. It's a good one to grow. It's pretty simple to grow tomatoes. What's another thing? I
think it's great, the broccoli though too. Similar for me, it's still a challenge for me.
Yeah.
Brassicas in general. I don't know. It's just it's all me. I know it, but it's really awesome. I've had a couple of successes in the last couple of years. Still haven't really nailed it down to something I've got down, but it's awesome to hear that you have too, because I completely agree. Broccoli is one of my favorite things. And if I could completely succeed at it, I would just be great.
I love it. I think for me, I was able to figure out like, it's all in timing, like how when you plant the seed, and also the variety. Like, if I find it like when growing like the heat tolerant varieties for the summer work best, because I'm able to grow it into like the early summer. and they're
Yeah.
fine. And then like for winter, like, growing like the cooler weather varieties that can kind of get through before the first real hard freeze. And then also fertilizing with fish emulsion fertilizer, like being consistent with that. That has helped like to promote growth for that. And also
Yeah.
making sure you check for pests. So all those
Def-
things have helped me.
Right on, right on. So here, real quick, before we let you go, let us know a little bit more about where viewers can find you, and let us know a little bit more about your Instagram and real quick, how you got real quick. Actually, I want to talk just real quick about that. How did you get started doing that, anyways?
I actually just on a whim during the pandemic, as most
Yeah.
probably gardeners, pandemic gardeners.
Okay. Yeah.
I was gardening before the pandemic, but my Instagram started post-pandemic, and I basically had my first daughter during the pandemic, and I was posting pictures on my personal Instagram profile, and one of my friends was like, every time you post a picture, I think it's your daughter, but you're posting pictures of your garden. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to create a separate Instagram page for my gardening, because I was really, we're all dealing with the pandemic, in 2020. I was a new mom. And so it was a great outlet for me to just, one, garden, and also, share, use it as like a garden vlog kind of journey, sharing my journey. So it literally was just starting it out of, finding a community of people, of gardeners. I followed nothing but gardeners and learned a lot from them. And so that's how I started my Instagram page.
Yeah. Awesome. And you got anything, let's see, that your Instagram page is just at the Urban Gardener Her, right?
At theUrbanGardenher.
And we've got a link right down below in the description for everybody to go check out your page there too. Keep it up. I think you got everything you've got growing on there is really cool. And again, I just really love urban garden spaces and people who are doing that sort of thing in the city like you are. And I love your clips and reels and all that sort of stuff. So keep that up, and hope everybody goes and checks out your Instagram as well too. And let her know that you found her here on the Let's Get Growing show.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Awesome, Alexa. Thank you so much. Or Alexis, I'm sorry, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Enoch.
You betcha. You betcha. You have a great time there at your event today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Have a great
you.
holiday. All right.
Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits.
The answer to this week's trivia question is C. pH numbers indicate how acidic or alkaline your soil is. Some plants prefer higher or lower pH levels, but the majority of plants need something that's right in the middle. A pH range of 6 to 7 is considered neutral and is perfect for the majority of plants you have growing in your home garden. Thanks for watching. Be sure and check out Sarah's Seed Shop, where you can find garden seeds at unbeatable prices. Enjoy the rest of the show.
All right, all right. What a great conversation with Alexis from @theUrbanGardener. Her, and again, like I said, we've got links down below for our guests, so definitely be sure to go and check out those links for our guests. And again, too, we'll go get in their comment section too, and let them know that you found them through the Let's Get Growing show. That's really awesome to do that. And as well, too, if you are with us and you're still here right now, definitely hit that like button, click the thumbs up for us, subscribe if you haven't, and share with all of your friends as well too. I forgot to tell you all of this at the top of the show, but better late than never anyways. And also too, like I mentioned about the comments, comments are really important for all of us creators out there who are making shows and clips and reels and all of that sort of stuff. Any of those sort of engagements, definitely hit that thumbs up, but also jump into that comment section. Just say hi if you have to. That's a really always a great thing. Let everybody know that everybody you like and if you're following and all of that sort of stuff, definitely let them know. Definitely jump into comments, because that is really truly, like, other than watching and participating with the show and all of that, that's really truly one of the best ways to help and support a show like ours or any of the other creators and people we have as guests and all of that, is to go onto their profiles and YouTube channels and Instagram pages and check out their reels and posts and videos and leave comments for them, because those comments are really great. And it's really great to just really introduce yourself, let people know that you're following along with them. It's really awesome for all of us, and then ultimately it gets us seen by more people as well too. So that, again too, like I said, it's just really great way to support everybody as well too there. And one thing else I want to also mention to everybody too, also for all of you who follow along with us on our community and you haven't yet already, definitely go down in the description below, and I've got a link down there to our Let's Get Growing Facebook group. This is our Facebook group for the Let's Get Growing show, the Urban Gardener channel, and all of you who follow along. We've got some great members of our group in there who are always sharing great things growing out of their gardens. It's a great place for you to also come and share the things that you've got growing in your gardens too. As I get to see all of you, and we can talk and interact through the comments and all of that, but it's really awesome to see what you all have growing on, and that's a great opportunity for you to be able to do that and share pretty much directly with me and everybody else in the Let's Get Growing community what you have growing on. You can also as well to ask gardening questions there, maybe help some other people with some gardening issues too. Our Facebook group is just a really fun group of people, and I hope that you come and join along with us too and share there. It's really great. And let's see here. Let's get moving right along today. We've got a really awesome guest today. I've been looking forward to this interview coming up here. Let's just jump right in here with our featured guest today.
You never know when you might learn something, and that's what this is about for me. These are people that I admire. Please welcome my next guest.
All right. From the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences at Texas Tech University, we have joining with us Vikram Baliga, the plant prof or plant professor. Which one is it, Vikram?
Plant prof. I mean, either, whatever. I respond to most things, but it's the plant prof.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining with me today. It's been awesome. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Excellent. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself real quick here. Tell us a little bit about what you do there as I introduce you from Texas Tech University, right? You're still there. That's professor, right?
I am. Yeah. So I am a horticulture professor here at Texas Tech. I teach intro horticulture every semester. I'll be teaching sustainable vegetable production in the fall. And then for the past, 5.5 years, up till the end of last year, I was running our greenhouse and horticultural gardens on campus. So a little bit of plant stuff all the time. And just mostly teaching now, still supervising out of the gardens and greenhouse. And I help oversee our So we have a community garden that was donated
Okay.
to our department,
Oh, excellent.
a couple of years ago, and so I help oversee that as well with a grad student.
Is that a community garden as in like a university community, or is it a public community garden?
So public actually. So it's a
Okay,
kind of a
perfect.
weird situation.
Yeah.
There was a woman that lived in a community that's a mile less than a mile from campus, just kind of right across from campus, that had sort of a double city lot that has been a community garden for years and years and years. And we had a group previously years ago that started what we call the Heart of Lubbock Community Garden on this piece of land, because she didn't want a house built on it. She wanted it to be sort of a public space. And a few years ago, she decided that she would like to kind of donate the space to the university so we could
Oh,
kind of keep
awesome.
the garden going long term. And yeah, so it's been sort of a challenge, honestly, because we sort of signed the paperwork and got all of it going in like December of 2019, and then spring of 2020 rolled around and everything shut down and all of our
Mhm.
students had to go home. And so
Oh
it's
boy,
taken us
yeah.
some time to sort of get it rolling, but yeah, it's been a cool project, and we're getting more and more community involvement, and it's really been a good thing.
Yeah, it just again too, I love community gardens. I love that idea. Again, coming more from, as I was talking with our previous guest, being an urban gardener,
Mhm.
being, growing in cities and being folks who, deal with limited spaces. Luckily for me, I've I've reached out and expanded my spaces, into unused city spaces and things like that around me, as well, so but I love the idea of community gardens. We have a couple of them that I go to. I don't garden in them because I've got enough spaces, but I love going down there, talking with the gardeners and hanging out. I used to grow in one of them, and it's just always great and fun to catch up with people. And for garden nerds like ourselves, there's no better place to just be able to hang out all day and just talk about growing things with people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. It's a good service for the community, and
Hmm.
both as an educational tool and I'm of the opinion that um, in a lot of ways, I think that the folks living in the community are not going to completely, replace their grocery store runs with a
No,
community
exactly.
garden, but it's a good way to supplement. It's a good way to learn. And it gives, I think, folks, especially in an urban environment, such a good connection to where their food comes from, to what
Hmm.
goes into producing and growing that food. And I think even if it's not like, and there's a lot of data that backs this up, even if it's not like replacing all the veggies that someone's going to go buy, it actually increases consumption of vegetables and of fresh
Hmm.
produce and things like
Yeah.
that. And so
And
I think
further awareness of the, food system and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
also, sorry, I had interrupted you.
No, 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 go ahead. I was just gonna say, yeah, from kids to adults, it's like
Mhm.
such a net benefit in our urban communities.
Yeah, it really truly is, and I think we need more and more of them. And it's every time I see a place, similar to kind of what Alexis described that she has near her, where it's just like an open lot and it's just doing nothing, and it's just been sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. I always think, man, how awesome would that be for this neighborhood if they could just use that space, grow some food, just in the time being, if somebody wants to use it later, develop it later,
Mhm.
it's a garden space that's not, you're not transforming the space too much to where it's not usable. So I think that's a great thing that cities can do a lot more of, and really, again, to bring people together to where you can kind of empower them. Like you said, we can't really attain full self-sustainability, self-sufficiency in a sense, but as much of it as we can kind of grasp onto is really empowering, right?
Absolutely. And there's so much research that's gone into just the benefits to an urban setting of public green space in general, whether that's like
Mhm.
pocket parks or traditional parks or food supply kind of things, right? Uh, and if you look at just like the monetary cost of upkeeping empty lots, like you were talking about, and derelict buildings, and there's a big like social cost, a big monetary cost, that converting those to like food production or a little park or something is so cool. And it, reduces crime, it improves health outcomes, it
Hmm.
does so much good in a community that more cities, I think, should really be grabbing onto this as not just something that's good for the community, which it is, but something that's
Yeah.
going to save them money in the long term
Yeah,
and
and a low cost
resources.
investment anyways too.
Yeah.
It's just a low cost investment in your community, and yeah, it's a no-brainer when it comes to that stuff for sure. Definitely. So let's actually dig into your garden story a little bit here. This is what we love to talk about with our guests a little bit. How and when did when did plants and gardening and everything become something in your life that you just kind of gravitated towards?
Yeah. So honestly, kind of my whole life. One of the
Yeah.
earliest pictures of myself I have is I'm like 2 or 3 years old, standing in the backyard, like staring at corn plants. I grew
Mhm.
up gardening with my granddad. My mom and I lived with my grandparents till I was, maybe 10 or 11 years old. And, that was something that my granddad always did. He was a doctor, a family practitioner, and other things, but he always had a garden. We always had a garden. And so that was just something I always grew up doing. And getting into college, I did a year of engineering, which was not my thing. Uh, uh, I had these plans of like, because my granddad was a doctor, I wanted to go to med school, but do like sort of the bioengineering side of it. It was a whole thing. Uh, yeah, not so much. So once I decided that that was not the thing I wanted to do, I kind of gravitated to what I knew, which was horticulture, growing things, and um, that's sort of what I got into, and I have not looked back. Like it's been just the best thing.
Yeah, yeah. So this is college discovery basically, and it's just a rediscovery of
Mhm.
something that had already really been kind of a part of your life, but it's something that you just, and again, that's something too. And for me, as I was sharing with Alexis earlier too, is that similar kind of sense of what was going on. I had a connection with things like, I tell people all the time about the house plants and all of that. That had been a part of my life, all through childhood. I
Mhm.
learned plants and got to have that real connection with plants. I did have one thing though too that I think that, and I kind of wanted to touch on with you too, kind of going back to Texas Tech University and the things that you do there too, is my father went to the horticultural program. I'm trying to remember what it is. It's out of Olympia, Washington,
Mhm.
and I can't remember what it was, but that was one of my earliest memories I have, was going to these big, and to me they were giant because I was a little kid. These giant greenhouses,
Yeah.
just full of all these. I'm sure they're not as big if I went back and I'd be like, wait a minute, this isn't, But it was just one of those early memories I had, of being able to see plants and all that sort of thing. So I think it was really instilled in me, and then I went on this whole life of doing other things. I mean, I constantly carried some house plants with me. My pothos I've got behind me, I've had probably almost 27, 28
Oh
years
wow.
now, but so I always had plants in a sense, but discovering growing food was a real huge thing for me. And again, was really big. And, but tell us a little bit more about those greenhouses, though, too, because actually I want to kind of get in about that too a little bit.
Yeah.
What's it like working in that, in a greenhouse environment like that, and teaching students about all of this stuff going on in there?
Yeah, it's a challenge in a lot of ways. It's a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
we have about I'm gonna get this number wrong. 20,000 square feet of greenhouse space, just shy of that, 18, something like that.
Yeah.
Plus classrooms, plus a lot of other things out at our facility. And then it's surrounded by about 3.5 acres of horticultural garden, public
Yeah.
garden. And so it is first and foremost a teaching facility, right? We do
Hmm.
research, we do other stuff, but I always like to say that we teach our undergrads about science and the scientific process.
Yeah.
We teach our master's students how to like do science, how to approach the scientific process and learn more things, make discoveries. And then our PhD students sort of learn to run their own program. They learn how to do it themselves, but all the way
Yeah.
through from the 18-year-olds who it's the first time outside of their parents' house to the older PhD students that are either going back to school or in for the first time in that, capacity. Like, it's all about learning the process and learning about plants and learning how to approach it. So we teach a number of classes out of there, classes and labs. During a normal semester, whatever that means anymore, I don't really know. We'll run about 600 students a week through our facility.
Oh, wow.
So we stay.
So when you're growing plants and producing plants in these greenhouses, what are like you said, it's mainly teaching for one, but are you is it a production at all? Are you growing plants, say plant starts for some sort of, I don't know, fundraising or anything like that? Do you guys do, is there some sort of process of growing the plants?
Yeah, so we do
in it?
we do a little bit of both, and we incorporate that into some of our coursework. And so we do a couple of plant sales a year, just to help support the program, build new displays, keep stuff up. And we do everything from ornamentals to like landscape ornamentals, annuals, perennials, house plants, cacti, succulents, tropicals, and then a lot of veggies and herbs as well. So some of our classes help produce some of that stuff, from starting seeds, taking cuttings, all that. But we also keep a staff of anywhere from like 8 to 10 undergraduate student workers.
Okay.
So I am of the opinion, and of course I'm biased, that it's the coolest campus job.
I would agree.
And so one thing I'm very proud of, and one thing we're very proud of, is that inside the greenhouse, outside the greenhouse, in the garden, the propagation, everything is done by our student workers. And so we feel like it's our job as an educational institution, not just to have them there as like grunts who water plants, but actually teach them about landscape and food production and all that. So it's very much an experiential learning environment. And so they get a lot out of it. We get a lot out of it, get to sell plants to the public. We just did our spring plant sale at the beginning of the month. And I think like we probably had 1,000 people come through the garden.
Wow.
It's good to make some money, but more than that, it's good just to get people out there and show them a little bit of what we do and what our students have done. And we're very proud of them, and very proud of the work that they put out.
Yeah, just a really great kind of showcase in a sense of what you guys are all about through what you're producing and everything there. That's really awesome, man. I would love to, again, like I said, I just got that memory of these greenhouses and stuff. And I sometime I've got to get an opportunity to go and check out an operation like that and see something for myself and everything and revisit some of those memories. But that's just, like I said, like got to be the awesomest job out of the whole thing, right?
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I don't office out there anymore. I did for a lot of years. I've hired a new manager for the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
And I love being more centrally on campus because it's more convenient. But there's days that I'm like, I really wish I could just walk out of my office into a greenhouse. Like that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And again, I like to say it's the coolest job. We have the coolest jobs on campus.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, all right. So you got all this awesome plant knowledge. In fact, one thing I wanted to touch on too, you are actually a PhD yourself, right? So shouldn't it be Dr. Vikram Baliga, right?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't get too hung up on that. That's
this is a little humble for the doctor, right? That's all right. That's good enough for me though. So let's see, you've got all of that experience and now you've turned to making reels on social media. And I'll tell you, this is what I found when I found your reels. I was like, this is a guy I've definitely got to have on this show someday because I love it. I mean, I love what you do. And for two different reasons too. And I've kind of mentioned this as we were talking about having you on last week as well too, is that not only, are you really doing these real cool things and you're just really digging into the science of some of these plant, let's just say myths or things that people talk about and all of that out there. We'll see some crazy videos. There's some of the craziest stuff out there and it's amazing. And you grab right onto that stuff and just jump right at it and get right into it. So not only are you really kind of busting gardening myths in a sense, but I think one of the cool things is that we see some things that do look kind of crazy because plants do some crazy things. We touched on peanuts in the last interview. Plants are interesting. They do weird things and take on weird things as well too, in a sense too. So you also show us some of those things that look kind of weird and crazy and say, yeah, that's actually true. And I love that about what you do. I mean, you're not just busting myths, but you're also kind of helping us understand some of these weird things that are actually really true as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And look, like I have said before, and I think it kind of like you're saying, plants are cool enough on their own, right? They
Hmm.
do the coolest stuff on their own, and there's so much out there that would just blow people's minds, just blow people's minds
Yeah.
as to like how these plants work in nature. That I don't feel like we should need to come up with all this fake stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like truth, the truth of the science and of nature is somehow and a lot of times way cooler than any fiction we could come up with. Just
Hmm.
fascinating things. And you know, it's funny. I think like a lot of people, I jumped into social media. Let me take one step back. My previous career,
Yeah.
I worked for the extension service. So I was a public. I've done a few different things, but before I started at Texas Tech, I worked for the AgriLife Extension Service. So I was a county agent. I did public
Okay.
horticulture, education kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
And you know, when I started there, my agency didn't have a huge social media presence. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, if our job is to take science where people are, you know, holding a class in a building where people come get lunch and all that is cool. I love that. That's great. But I can talk to what 30 people in an hour at a class like that, or I can put a video on social media and maybe talk to 30,000 people in the same amount of effort and time. And so I kind of jumped into it. Then I've done a lot of like traditional media from working with the news, both radio, television, newspapers, all of
Yeah.
that. I've done quite a bit of that. But I think like a lot of people in 2020, I was bored. Like I spent a lot of time in that greenhouse by myself watering
Hmm.
because all of our students went home, and like we were told we can't have any student staff for like from like March through probably the end of June in 2020. It was
Yeah.
like
Oh my.
me hanging out by myself at a greenhouse, just watering plants and trying to keep stuff alive and finish my dissertation. So I think I started to like
Yeah.
lose my mind a little bit. And I was like, I need an outlet so I don't just totally crack.
Right.
And one of the things I discovered early on in this is just, yeah, there is so much misinformation out there, just so much.
Yeah.
I call it weaponized nonsense.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, this could be a fun, just sort of funny, lighthearted way to teach a little bit, but also just have an outlet where I can vent about all the dumb stuff I see on the internet.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And really, again, too, so much misinf in that it just drives I have to like pull back in some sense because I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna in a sense, I don't have to be alone somewhere and see some of this stuff for it to start driving me crazy, man. I'll tell you what, I go going off. But in one of them too, and I've seen a few videos you've done too. I think reels really kind. I mean, as much as you're out there fighting the good fight out on the reels, trying to help do it. There's so many people. Like there's the one where he's just really,
Oh
and
man. Oh man.
he's doing some of the most ridiculous, stupid things out there, but. This sells to people. This. People follow along. I mean, you just got to get in the comment section
Oh
and
yeah.
listen to all the people who are like, oh wow, this is amazing, I had no idea. And I'm just like, oh no, here's a generation of would-be gardeners who are going to be dissuaded
Mhm.
by people who are out there pushing nonsense.
And that's exactly it. Because it seems like I don't know. It seems in some ways, I think, looking at it from the outside, that it's sort of a petty battle to fight. Like, okay, why do you care this much? But from the person you mentioned, I know who exactly who you're talking about. Where a lot of his stuff is not right, but plausible. Like it's like right on that line to like
Yeah.
5 minute crafts, which is just absurd, just completely absurdity. But then if you look at the comments, like you said, for either one of those people are like, oh, I'm going to try that. And then they go and they kill their plants or they fill their home with fruit
Hmm.
flies or whatever. And then like, yeah, then they're just completely turned off
Yeah.
from that. And I also think on sort of a bigger scale, and this is going to sound probably more, make it sound more important than it maybe is, but like any type of like misinformation or disinformation primes people to believe more of it. And so if we're not pushing back even at these like simpler things, these maybe quote unquote less important things, like if you can swallow the small lie, people can swallow a bigger lie. And I think that sort of in our lanes, in our niches, if we can push back against bad information, we can make it easier for other people in their own niches to do the same thing. Like, I think it's important, even though I mostly just yell about bananas and stuff. Like, it's silly, but it's important silly. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, again, too, I get in there and I try to like say, hey, for the things I know enough about too, and I'm sure there's just way more, you're able to offer way more knowledge than even I can in some senses, but I still try to do the good fight too. Like, I don't want, because it really is, and I've found, and you can see through people who are newer to gardening and the posts that they make, that sometimes it's really simple stuff that can really dissuade them and really make them think they've got a brown thumb versus a green thumb, which is something I really just don't believe in. I think everybody has a green thumb. It's just, we don't, we have to make that connection, when it comes down to it. But again, so much misinformation there. I want to jump into a little bit more of that here in just a minute, but we did have a few questions and things coming through here. I wanted to jump into and talk about here. Serena was asking, let's see, Dieffenbachia. Okay, yeah, that's a Dieffenbachia needs staking or deeper pot as it gets taller to prevent falling over and curling up on the ends of the stems. A Dieffenbachia. Those have pretty thick stems in themselves, though, too. They should be pretty much holding themselves up, right?
For the most part, yeah, I would think so. I think some of it will probably depend on what kind of media you have it in, what kind of growing media. Like a soilless potting media that's a little bit looser.
Yeah,
you may get some of those stems falling over, a little bit of breakage as they get bigger. So I'm sort of a proponent of temporary staking. I don't like staking a lot of plants long term because they need to be able to sort of, for lack of a better way to say it, it's not the right way to say it, but learn to stand up on their own. But if you've got breakage, if you've just repotted it and your roots haven't had a chance to establish and all that yet, temporary staking is not a bad idea. But long term, I tend to pull stakes from even house plants and even like greenhouse grown plants after a while, just so they can develop sort of a stronger stem and stronger roots.
Yeah, strength really is kind of a goal of your plant and growing your plant is, and like you said, we want our plants to be able to hold themselves up. We know then that they've got a good root structure. They got a good base and everything, and then that they're able to hold themselves up, because a weak plant isn't really something that we really want to be keeping in our garden, really, because then that becomes an attractor to some other things that become a problem.
I agree.
So yeah, definitely. Okay, let's check. John Jude asked, let's see here. That granite dust for bug protection, do you use it? Have you tested it? Granite dust.
I don't know that I have used granite dust specifically. There are some things like diatomaceous earth, which is like sort of ground up glass, essentially, super small particles that can help with soft-bodied insects. It's not appropriate in every situation, probably, but if you've got aphids, if you've got caterpillars, if you've got stuff like that, a dusting of that, it's fairly safe. You want to follow instructions no matter what you're using, right? Like, make sure you're using them carefully. But it can be very useful.
Granite dust and applications for your soil, maybe like other rock dust, azomite, those sort of things. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not. I wouldn't think of a dust as a bug protection, but maybe something as a soil additive or something, maybe.
Yeah, I honestly don't know a whole lot about that specifically. It'd be interesting to look into. I'm always very interested in new ways to deal with, pest problems or soil problems or whatever. So maybe there's something to that. I unfortunately just don't know specifically.
All right. Okay, let's see. We got viewer hands catch drops in here, get a little philosophical, but maybe we could tie this into maybe like soil science and that sort of thing right here. He's like, hello gardeners, hello professor. If I may ask the professor, how would you describe the cycle of life on this planet? Isn't it odd how everything consumes something else? So I don't know, maybe if you got something to say about that specifically, but I think that's one of the things I found fascinating about soil and soil science itself too, is this, I remember someone talking about, imagine being the size of like a microorganism or something like that, and you're in the soil, what life would look like at that point. And it's just something, it'd be the most awful thing you've ever seen. It would be a horror show, because everything is competing and killing each other and eating each other and doing things. But it's that process that we create this magical balance, right? I don't know. Maybe if we could tie, maybe that ties in. That's kind of what I was getting when I was reading that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think it's important to understand that, like, we're all made of the same stuff, basically, right? And we live in this more or less closed system, where the things that are today were something else. They were recycled. You know, the sand in your yard, the dirt in your yard, was either bedrock under your feet or a mountain somewhere else that wore down and the dirt blew to where you are. We live in a closed system.
Yeah.
And so we have our producers, plants, fungi, other things that essentially turn sunlight into everything else. You know, they take carbon dioxide from the air, they take power from the sun, and that's sort of the engine that drives life on this planet. But then once that happens, those basic components, like when an animal dies or a plant dies, the soil microorganisms you were talking about cycle them back into the system, which plants take up those nutrients. Those plants are eaten by an animal. And so whether you're a vegetarian or a carnivore or a vegan or anything in between, like the producers on our planet are cycling all that back into the system. And, you know, one day, like, we all kind of return back to this closed system, and at least the stuff that makes us up does. You know, we're more than the sum of our parts, but those parts get recycled back into something else. And I think it's weird to think about, but I think it's also really cool to think about that. And when we think about things like, you know, protecting the environment, it becomes even more pressing, because like the stuff that makes us up, the stuff that makes up future generations, the food we'll eat, the water we drink, everything else, like we only have the stuff that we have, and we need to take care of the stuff that we have. So from a philosophical level, yeah, I think that the life cycle on this planet, ultimately being in some ways destructive, like you were talking about, like we have to eat other things to survive. We have to, you know, that's not the end of the story, right? The story, it keeps going. It keeps being cycled. And I think that's cool. I think it's cool to think about.
Yeah. Again, too, and it's on all of these different scales of different ways we look at things, where these sort of, it's like I said about the soil or whatever. It's kind of crazy to think about in some senses, but that balance that's created by a lot of stuff, you know, when we're taking things out of balance is when we're seeing just this, you know, like with climate change and all these other sort of things, you know, we're taking things out of balance, and that creates these problems. But if we were working more in balance and doing some of these other things, we can create a great cycle that, you know, it's just, again, really deep stuff.
It is. Yeah. No.
Pretty deep stuff, but when it comes down to it, it's you know, it's about creating balances. And if we take it to what we're talking about in our gardens and what we're growing and all that sort of stuff as well too, it's on that level too.
Well, and I think just as a quick point,
connect with nature.
Yeah. And I think as a quick point, I think it is important, like this conversation that we're having right now and these questions that have come in, we have to sort of marry science and philosophy. I think that we have done too much to separate the two. But if we look back through history, science without humanities and philosophy has led to some terrible things, right?
Yeah.
And philosophy without the backing of science sometimes comes up with some stuff that's not plausible, that doesn't fit with the way
Mhm.
it works. So if we're balancing the science we do, our pursuit of science, with our humanity and with our philosophy as
Yep.
humans, we come up with something that's equitable, that is kinder than maybe science has
Mhm.
been in the past. But it keeps us sort of grounded. It keeps our philosophy grounded in how things work. And so I think these are super, super important conversations. I think we have to have those together.
Yeah, yeah, and more of also 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, I was, talking about this kind of common ground philosophy I have about us people as our different backgrounds, opinions, all that sort of stuff, that the garden makes this great common ground for us to come together, despite all of that sort of stuff. And then as well, it's also a great place where we can find that knowledge about the balance of things too, like you're saying, that we can learn more about how that is beneficial to us. And I think even when we get to plant science and soil science and learning just a
Yeah.
little bit more about nature and our connection to that, then that helps us understand things just a little bit better. And it can be just simply about learning how to grow some things in a garden too, that
Yeah.
helps get you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The more we learn, and the more we learn about things, the more we can care about things. People don't, it's hard to care about something you don't understand. It's hard to care about something you're not familiar with, and so I think so many of our issues come down to education. And I think the way we approach education sometimes. So the more we can learn, the better we are.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So yeah, I still want to jump into some, because I got you here. I want to talk about some plant myths and some
Sure.
things. Well, you do these great reels. What's one of your favorite ones that you've done in the that's
Oh, well, I'm trying to think. Favorite, a
these
favorite is a loaded word
or
here.
or
Which one?
even some that you think are some of your top. I don't even It
So,
doesn't have to be an ultimate favorite, just some of the good ones you know.
well, I can tell you some of the ones that pop up the most. And I
Okay.
think what got me started into this was banana water, banana peel water. Okay. That
It
was like, that was
is
like my,
literally the top one right here.
yeah,
Bananas.
bananas and banana water. I swear. Uh, I don't know what it is, but there's all these videos, and not just from like the absurdist 5-minute crafts camp, but
Yeah.
uh, energetic white t-shirt guy we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
does some stuff on this. Well, not you.
I'm just I'm just saying, I thought well to wear this today, didn't
um, where okay, so there's this whole thing where like if you take a banana peel and most of these videos are like you stick it in a pitcher of water for 20 minutes and you let it sit and then you pour it on your plants. It gives your plant everything it needs. That is just that's how you get fruit flies. That's how you grow. If you want fruit flies,
Mhm.
that's how you get fruit
Oh,
flies.
for sure.
Um, there are we don't go far enough with some of these things, right? It's like, oh, if you bake them for a while and pulverize them and then it's ready to go. If we do all this, like you can turn a banana peel into nutrients, but the best way to do that is to throw it in the compost, right? Make compost.
Mm.
That's how you make nutrients out of banana peels. Uh, Dunking them
Yes.
in water, even though, yes, they have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium and all that stuff that plants need, you're not
Mhm.
going to get it into a plant available form just by sticking it in a pitcher for 20 minutes, an hour, a day. Now,
Yeah.
there is some research that you can do it for 2 or 3 weeks and essentially ferment that product and get that biological activity going.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, huh.
and you're essentially making compost tea or some kind of humic acid.
Mhm.
Then you can use it. Um,
But
but
who wants banana peels rotting around in water for 2 to 3 weeks just to try to get something that you can again, yeah.
just throw it in the compost. Like that's it.
Yeah, it's compost. It's perfect for the compost. The worms will love it.
And they just get more absurd. Like that's where it started for me. And then
Mm.
it's like, oh, take a banana and punch holes in it with a pencil and plant your citrus in it. And then you like the funny thing is that they'll plant like, lemon seeds in a banana. And the next
Yeah,
frame is like beans growing out of
right,
it.
it's a beanstalk, yeah.
Or they take oh, I know my favorite one. The one that probably got me the most was where they go to the store and buy a seedless banana, which the bananas you buy from the store are seedless bananas. I know there's
Yep.
little black dots in them. They are not functional seeds, right?
That's right.
And they take a slice out of it and they put it in the ground. And then the next, like, bananas are monocots, right? So they're going to come
Mhm.
up looking sort of like a little grass.
Yep.
The next frame is all around where they planted that banana, like some kind of a dicot, like a bean or something coming up.
Right, yeah.
And then the frame after that is fully mature bananas on a plant. I'm like, that is not how any of this works. That's not how this works.
It just doesn't
I think that one got me the most. Like, like
Yeah.
that
And again,
if I had to pick a favorite.
yeah, it's just again the banana stuff, the things it's always again too like poking something into a banana, stick the banana into and then something happens. It's just crazy amazing. Or again, or what about eggshells?
Eggshells is another one of
Like,
these that's like,
it's useful in its certain way,
if you
not so useful in so many others.
right, you can compost eggshells real well. Actually, they're great from your compost. If you break them
Mhm.
up, I've seen some people bake them and run them through a blender, which does speed up the composting process, right? You've got they're
Yeah.
partially broken down.
Less surface space.
Mhm.
Yep.
And your microorganisms can work on them better. If you throw like eggshells directly into your garden, it takes them so long to break down. Uh, Eventually, yeah, it'll help. One of the grosser ones that I've started seeing recently is people cracking eggs into the bottom of their planting holes.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it's just don't do that. Like, there
Right.
is absolutely no reason to do that.
Yep.
It's just gross, and it's going to attract probably a lot of things, both microorganisms and the bigger organisms
Animals.
that you don't
Animals.
want.
Yeah. Another one though too, again, and I just and I don't know, and again, don't know enough about, but you see people talk about this one all the time, and that's just sticking a whole fish right down in the planting hole, and then put your tomato right on top of this rotting fish.
You know, there was, and this has been a long-term thing, from stories of indigenous people doing this, but it was done in a very specific way. So you can do in-bed composting. Like, you can
Mhm.
compost in the garden. And essentially
Yeah.
that's what that is, right? Fish meal
Yeah.
is a great fertilizer source. A lot of times what was done is they were planted very deep, like, 18, 24 inches deep. Soil was piled on top of that, and then plants were planted at like above that, so there was sort of a soil barrier.
Right.
Sometimes what people will do that's fairly effective is dig a trench in the middle of the garden,
Yeah.
pile your garden compost into that, and then plant to the sides of it. So you've got a place where earthworms and
Mhm.
microorganisms can work on
Yeah,
whatever you
exactly.
put in there, and then they work it into the soil. You don't have to put your plant directly on top of it.
Yeah.
Um, because if you think about nature, no one's out there planting fish. Stuff that dies lays on the surface of the soil,
Yep.
and then over time,
It breaks
microorganisms break
down
it
and comes
down.
down.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we can sort of mimic that in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But then you still got to bury it deep, or you'll get varmints. You
Yep.
can still run the risk of diseases that the plants don't care about, but you do.
Mhm.
E. coli is not great. Listeria is not great.
Mhm.
Uh, so, in my opinion, the safest way to do it, the most effective way to do it, is to have a backyard compost pile, or get like one of those composter things. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
fancy. And
Yep.
then let that process happen, and then use that compost in your garden. That's great. I'm all
Yeah.
about that.
Exactly. And I just think of the fish in the ground and I think of the plant and like growing around this rotting fish for that season. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? That plant,
mhm.
that season that you planted there, imagine the root system just kind of making its way around
Yeah.
it, because it's like what, but the plant the next year, because again we've let that process happen, the breakdown, let all those microorganisms and all those things feed on this and break it down. Now it's made something that next year I can imagine that plant just getting right in there, loving it, going after it, because now we've let that process. I think it's just this idea of like we want something instant, some sort of instant thing, and this just seems like throw a fish in, instant fertilizer, walk away, and it does its thing. But it's just, I don't
You
think that's the solution.
No, and that's such a good point. I think any like organic means of like managing and conditioning the soil, compost things, we got to think of them as a long-term process. we have gotten used to just going down to the garden center and buying a bag of fertilizer and throwing it out. And then in a week, you've got an effect from it, right? Because that's how our synthetic fertilizers work. And in our mind, we've connected, oh, this is a fertilizer source and this is a fertilizer source, and they should work the same way, and they don't.
No.
Our organic fertilizers, or let me say this differently, our organic sources of nutrients do work. Absolutely. That's how nature does it. But nature's not in a hurry, right? This is a multi-year process of breaking things down, of recycling them back into the system, like you were talking about earlier. So you can use both things. They're both tools, but they're used differently. And I think that's important to understand.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, too, bringing that organic connection to nature in our garden and all of that is learning to accept that things take time. It's a process, and we've got to allow that to happen. And then we benefit so much from it. Like I said, I grow in these alleyway spaces. And you know what the soil was like when I first started growing in these spaces? It was horrendous. It was terrible. And I was actually just talking about this to my neighbor the other day and was showing them. I was like, this was hard. This was like clay. This was like so hard to deal with. But I've been gardening now for 10 years in these spaces, just utilizing organic material and building organic material on, like you're saying, on top as things break down and make their way down. And I went over there and I showed him, I said, this was hard. I used to have to dig into this really hard with a shovel. And I was like, I just dug down with my hand. I was like, look at this. See how I could just put my hand down in there and pull up this really nice, rich soil right in this alleyway, that it took time though. It took me years to develop that, years to make it that good. It wasn't something I just walked into and threw something on it and then boom, it's ready to go.
Yeah. Where I live, it's native shortgrass prairie, about as far as you can see. But for 100 years, it's been ag land, agricultural land. And this is cotton country. People have grown cotton out here for like, again, 100 years. And so all of our houses in town are mostly on old cotton fields, which over time have been mined and depleted. And, the soils are not like, our soil structure is great. We've got a sandy clay loam, which is great for growing plants, but like our nutrient status is so low. And then you put a house on it, and the first thing they do is remove all the topsoil to get to a foundation. And if you're lucky, 4 inches of that topsoil comes back, 4 to 6 inches, if you're lucky. And so you got to think about, from a soil health perspective, you're going to put in some work and years of trying to get it to where you're talking about, like it's a healthy, well-managed, well-maintained soil. But like year one, like use the synthetic fertilizer to get your plants growing.
Right.
Give stuff a kickstart, and then add compost and add organic matter as you go, because you've got to get that cycle moving. You've got to get that cycle moving. And so I think a big issue is that, on the internet, it's fun to be able to distill things down to single quick talking points. And there's so much nuance in this, and there's so much to
really
this that
is.
it's hard,
It is. I mean, so many things. I think, like when I think about gardening, I always go back and forth when I start thinking gardening is easy. And then I start thinking about things and I'm like, oh, well, gardening's hard. And then I'm like, no, it's not hard. It's, and I go back and forth because there's some pretty simple concepts. But then, once we get to understand some of those simple concepts, it gets us started. It gets us on the road of growing and figuring things out. Then we dig into some of these more deeper things and start to learn more about what makes things happen. And then on the sense of like building something up too, is I always tell people, if you want a good, strong organic garden, besides the synthetics and all of that, you do have to expect that it's going to take a while. Your first year's garden isn't going to be the best. Your second year garden isn't going to be as good as your third year garden. You got to think of it as a progression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as long as you're like, grow things in a way that you feel good about, that are as environmentally friendly as possible. And then just like kind of commit to it, right? Like
That's
you're in it for the long haul.
That's right.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is a good thing ultimately, and I again, it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life was finding myself in the garden, and I hear that story from so many people as I interview and talk to them. One other one I want to kind of dig in real quick. I've got a couple of things I want to just stop on. Got a whole list of things I wanted to talk to you about, but I don't think we'll make it to all of them. Real quick, one of the ones that comes up every single year, this is one that gets me going in the comment sections a lot of times, and I just wanted to see if maybe you could help kind of clarify things a little bit for us. Everybody loves growing tomatoes. Tomatoes are the big crop. It's just everybody. Doesn't matter. I ask people, what's your favorite thing to grow? Tomatoes always pops up. But one of the things that does pop up every single year in social media are posts about BER, blossom and rot. This is a turmoil and horror story for so many gardeners, especially new gardeners out there. Maybe you could talk a little bit from a science perspective about blossom and rot, what's actually happening, and maybe some solutions.
So blossom end rot is potentially a complex problem, right? It's not just one thing that causes it. We talk a lot about calcium, and how a calcium deficiency can be a major cause of blossom end rot, and that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not just that we don't have calcium; it's that deficiency in calcium is leading to disease problems. Calcium is important in plant protection and all kinds of things, right? So, one, if your soil type is high in calcium, like mine is, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a plant available form of calcium, like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But another thing is that calcium you can have some solubility problems. And so keeping your tomatoes watered, not necessarily like super heavily, but consistently, is a big thing that can help. Consistent water on your tomatoes. If you let it go dry for a long time and then water it super heavily, you'll get like radial cracking and concentric cracking, which is a physiological problem. But also it can lead to nutrient uptake problems. It can lead to disease problems because a stressed plant is a vulnerable plant.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of these diseases will start attacking the fruit and the blooms and things like that first. So, it's a sunlight issue, it's a water issue, it's a calcium issue. So I think the biggest things that I can tell people is get a soil test, know what's down there, know what plant available forms of nutrients are in there. And then whether you're using bone meal or different kinds of sources of, plant available calcium, compost that has eggshells in it, whatever, make sure your soil status is good. Make sure your water is consistent. And then if you're in a place that's as hot as the place that I'm in, give your tomatoes some afternoon sun protection. Not all full sun is created equal. And
That's right.
Just because your little plant label says full sun, that means 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight.
Yeah.
I'm out here in the flattest place in the country, maybe aside from Death Valley. We have over 200 miles north to south, a 1% grade. We're so flat. You can watch your dog run away for a day and a half. We deal with issues with where our day length during the summer is 14 hours of sunlight. Your tomatoes are done by about 2 p.m. So if you can give them some afternoon shade, you'll deal with a lot of those disease problems, water problems, and physiological problems. So just taking a look at your environment can help with your tomatoes a lot.
Yeah, that was one of my early lessons to learn. I get a lot of full sun and all of that. Even growing peppers up on a rooftop. Peppers love sun, right? Yeah. Have them out full sun all day long on on some really hot summer days, and you'll find that peppers they'll burn just like any other plant does, and it's probably good to get some sort of shading there. But on the subject of blossom end rot, I've kind of learned and understood that calcium really being one of those issues for sure, but it could be one of two things. Mainly the idea that the plant itself just can't take up calcium. So calcium is more than likely already available. It's just through maybe overwatering, underwatering, which seems to be the biggest culprit when it comes down to it, just locks the plant out from being able to uptake those sort of nutrients because of that stress. Does that sound right?
Yeah. So plant like calcium uptake is again, it's a major plant nutrient, but uptake can be challenging for the plant just in general, and
Yeah.
that calcium has to
So yeah, so then the idea of adding calcium in some sort of plant available form, if the plant itself is already stressed to the point, say through watering, and it can't take those up, you're just adding extra to a situation where it can't deal with it. And then one of the other things too, I think is really common, you'll just see, and this is the thing that gets me when I see the blossom end rot discussions that happen on posts and all of that, is just this recommendation of just throw eggshells right into your garden, you know, or do these sort of things. And it brings us back to that idea that things take time. And even a ground up eggshell is still going to take time for it to become plant available. So it's not just that instant fix to take care of your blossom end rot.
Right. And if your soil's a little more acidic, that process may go a little faster because you will have more activity. But yeah, it's got to be a plant available form. And I think so many problems come back to water status and consistent watering, because you have to think about these plants are taking up their nutrients in a like aqueous solution, like through the water. As they pull water from the roots, they pull nutrients too. So we kind of have to balance all those things out. But step number one, get your watering right, get your light right, and then think about like, do I need to amend the soil and things like that.
And then one last thing on that though too, is a plant that's already dealing with this, so you're seeing it, it's happening, it's happening, it's done, those things are done. The plant will eventually, through these changes you make, it'll adjust, and then you can get fruits that'll grow right later. And there are just some varieties, like I think Romas, San Marzanos, these sort of like the paste tomatoes, which are just more susceptible to this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's true. And some of your bigger slicers and things like that, you don't see quite as much end rot. You'll see more maybe like radial cracking or concentric cracking, but not a ton of end rot for sure.
All right. Let's see here real quick too. One of the things we've been talking about too, in fact, I was supposed to have an interview with this, with the person who developed this, but we had this new genetically modified organism tomato that hit the market this year that kind of caused an uproar and all of that. What do you think of the new genetically modified tomato and what it means for the home gardener in the future?
You know, I don't know much about that specific variety. I know that they've tried it a few times in the past with different, I think the Flavor Saver back in the 90s, and there've been a few different ones. Again, not knowing much about that specific variety, the new one, I think as a general concept, there's a lot, that's another thing there's a lot of misinformation about is genetic modification and what that means. I think there are cases where we don't know what we don't know. And so we need to like rigorously test all this stuff, which they do. I think that at some point when we're dealing with things like climate change, we're dealing with different weather patterns, we're dealing with new diseases popping up for plants and all those things. We at some point we may have to play ball even in the home garden. I'm seeing comments pop up about eggshells and worm bins. That's a great idea. Great idea. That's actually probably one of the best places to put them.
Ground up in the worm bin.
Yeah, absolutely. But going back to the GMOs, like I understand the hesitancy about it. I do. Like I genuinely do.
That's what I pretty much say too. Yeah.
I think that again, like everything else, they're a tool in the toolbox. I think they definitely have their place. And if you look at their use on sort of a global scale, we've reduced pesticide use, we've reduced fertilizer use, we have plants that are more drought tolerant. And if the plant can take care of itself a little bit, we don't, on an agricultural scale, have to spray for insects as much, things like that. I think the things that concern me is about the price. Because these
ownership and contracts and the price and
that's one of my big hangups, is that the amount of money that goes into these technologies that gets billed out somewhere, right? And that's to the consumer. And I think a lot of people want to save seed. I think there are some potential issues, both like physiologically for the plant and legally with saving seeds of genetically modified organisms. We don't see a ton of GMOs in the home market, so some of it is still, we don't know.
This is pretty much as far as we know. I mean, really the one the one that's changed everything as far as, because all of us gardeners would always say, you know, when people talk about GMOs and the home garden, is that you couldn't purchase seeds for GMOs because it coming down to that idea they're under contract, you know, there's, you know, the price and these sort of things are, you know, kind of built into all that sort of stuff. And I think there are some concerns. I just found this one to be interesting. You know, most of these genetically modified organism plants have had these different kind of organisms brought together, but this was two edible plants, an edible flower, snapdragon, for its purple color, brought into a tomato plant. So I thought that was interesting. They were edible plants. They were just using this method of bringing the genes together through, I can't remember what the process was called, but I just found it interesting. I thought they were interesting. But again, there are further and bigger questions that we need to continue to talk about and think about as we move forward, because there'll be new varieties of new things. I saw you did a post, because I wanted to talk about this real quick too. You do have a book. It's a kid's book, right?
I do have a book. It's here somewhere. I'll hold it up.
Plants
Hang on.
to the Rescue. It's a kid's
Yes.
book. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a copy of it there? Awesome. Yes.
Yeah, so this was a fun thing. This is a kid's book, nonfiction kids book about you know, problems we face, like climate change, food supply, pollution, those kinds of things, and how plants, and we sort of snuck fungi in there because they're not plants, but they're plant adjacent sort of.
Yeah.
And just like the purpose of the book was really just to get kids interested, right? So we cover everything from, let's see, you know, fertilizers to how rainfall works and how plants affect rain, to spinach that can send emails, and all kinds of stuff, glow in the dark plants. You know, we've got all kinds of things in here, and they're just little bite-sized sort of ideas that kids can hopefully get excited about and then want to dive into more. It's, you know, we don't really shy away from some of the bigger, scarier topics that are in here, but we try to cover all of it in a way that's like very hopeful, and like, here's how plants can help us. Here's how we can, through science and development and research, like address a lot of these big challenges. And it was a lot of fun. It was a fun project for sure.
Yeah, and looking and checking things out for the interview and all that, that's when I was like, oh, I wish I'd discovered the book just a little bit sooner. I'm getting one ordered up. I've got a granddaughter coming here in the next few weeks, and I'm gonna have that book on the bookshelf and definitely be waiting to share it with her when she's old enough to understand some of that sort of stuff. I think that's awesome that you take the time to be able to take some of these bigger, more complex subjects and break them down for kids to understand, and also, you know, help them connect with plants and nature just a little bit better. That's just really great. You also have a podcast, the Planthropology podcast.
Yeah. So I am, oh gosh, 4.5 years into this, and I interview just like plant science people, from industry to research and everything else. Just sort of figuring out, you know, my sort of tagline is we try to figure out why they do what they do, and why they're still doing it. Because I think I realize that sometimes the question we don't answer for our students in plant sciences is like, why, what now, what next? Like, you learn all this stuff, but then in like 20 years down the road in your career, what does that look like? Are you still going to care about soil science? Are you still going to care? And the fact is, people do. People love this. People like really put their lives and souls into it. So I've gotten to interview some really cool people, from you know, climate scientists to people that are involved in international politics and policy to we've got a couple episodes about food and like food supply recently, and the next episode is as well. So it's a lot of, you know, how much work putting this stuff together is.
For sure.
From scheduling to everything else, but it's been sort of a big part of my life for, like I said, over 4 years now, and I love doing it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just to really, again, too, some really great discussions. And like you said, just really in depth too. I mean, it's one thing to touch on some subjects, with my limited knowledge, sitting here with a doctor of plant and soil science with me right here. But it's great to listen to a discussion led by someone like yourself with other people with such great knowledge about this sort of stuff, because, it just, I really enjoy those conversations.
Well, and I appreciate that. And my goal for the whole show is for it to be approachable. Even when we're having like high level conversations about stuff, I
Mhm.
want it to be approachable. I think the best compliment I ever got on the show is that it was like sitting down in a coffee shop and hearing a couple of old friends catch up about science and what they're doing in life and all that. And that for me is like the vibe I want, is like just kind of casual conversations about science that we do dive into the subject matter, but um, I like to think in an approachable way that anyone listening can get something out of.
Yeah, that's awesome too. So yeah, you got so much great things going on, Vikram. I'm telling you, dude, just really awesome stuff, and so much great things that you're doing too. Whether it's teaching people in the university and having that community garden like we talked about, I think that's just really awesome. To this really great book that you're doing for kids, and again too, I just keep up those great reels too, man, because I just love listening to this stuff. I mean, when you're going. In fact, one I'll just mention too. I just watched actually just a little bit before we started the show, was about the Bradford pears. You really have a thing about Bradford pears, don't you?
I don't know why I picked them to be my nemesis. I guess everyone needs a nemesis, and mine's the
Right.
Bradford pear and 5 minute crafts. So I don't know.
Yeah. That's awesome though. But someone's got to be out there doing that. Someone's got to be helping people understand some of these weird and crazy things that are going on out there. And it's great to have someone who brings a little bit of humor and all of that to it. And your reels are great. I hope everybody checks out. We got a link right down below in the description for Vikram, the plant professor, plant prof. I can't remember what link we put. I think it's either Instagram or YouTube or something. But we got a link down there. You'll find him. Find other links. Go check out all of this stuff that Vikram's got going on. Go join him. Go check out that stuff. You've got some questions too. I mean, this is a guy you want to go dig in and find some science questions about some things. Go and check him out. Go drop some questions in his comment section, and I'm sure he's going to be willing to help you out. All right. Thanks again so much, Vikram, for joining with us today. It's just really awesome having you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And again, too, go and check them out. The link down below, and we'll catch you a little bit later. Thanks again, Vikram.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Excellent. So awesome to talk again with somebody who really knows what they're talking about. I mean, I try to throw out some just general plant knowledge, and I've got plenty of years of experience and in what I've done in my garden spaces and all of that. So I've got some things I think can help, but it's always awesome to have someone who's got some really, really good, we're talking university master gardener type knowledge about some things, and it's great to have them joining with us here. Sam says plant prophet. Yeah, the plant professor. Yeah, definitely. And says thanks, Professor Vikram Shears. Yes, awesome. Again, too, just really, really great to have someone who really knows what they're talking about, talk about some of this stuff. Because like I said, it's a crazy world out there in social media when we're, especially for us gardeners, and especially as we touched on too, so many just new gardeners getting a hold of some of this just crazy information, and leading them down the wrong path. And that just one of those things that really bothers me. And again, one of the reasons why I really like what he does and enjoy the content that he puts out there, just kind of breaking some of that stuff down for us so that we can understand it just a little bit better. So yeah, just really great again to have Vikram on the show with us today, as well as Alexis from @theUrbanGardenher. Again, another fun profile or page I like to follow on Instagram for the last few years. Again, just I love anybody doing urban garden spaces and growing in the city. And she has a really fun garden, and it's just really awesome, again, for people like her to be able to take people through their experience. And that's one of the things that just makes this show so fun, is to be able to introduce you to all of these just wonderful, awesome people out there in the gardening community doing some really great things and sharing just, you know, things that they've got growing on with all of us out there, just really helps us and inspires us to grow more and to do more ourselves. So just a really great guest for us here today. So I hope you all have really enjoyed the show today. I do want to mention again too that we do have our Sunday edition of the Let's Get Growing show tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And tomorrow we're going to be doing a gardening roundtable. We're going to have our sponsor, Ivy Organic, and Charles Malky joining us with Tom Spellman from Dave Wilson Nurseries. And we're going to get in and talking about fruit trees, urban orchards, and I'm going to definitely pepper them with some questions about growing trees in containers, because that's one of the things we do here around in our gardens. I've got several different container garden trees, our apple trees, our fig trees. We've got a pear and some peaches. Oh, the peaches are loaded this year too. So we're gonna have some great peaches coming off of that, all grown in containers too. So again, we'll get into some container fruit tree knowledge, just some fruit trees and tree knowledge in general. So that's going to be a really great conversation tomorrow. So you'll definitely want to join us for that. And definitely want to talk about next Saturday on the show. We're going to have with us our good friend and one of our first guests we had on the show this last year when we started the show up, Scott Head from Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Scott's just one of those fun channels and garden channels that I have followed for many years, and I just love this content. I love what he does there with his gardening and all of that in his channel, and it's gonna be great to have him back on the show again. Another great guest returning to the show, so join with us next Saturday for that, as well as, and again, we're going to promote this. I'm promoting this starting this week, a couple of weeks ahead of time, because I am super, and if you saw the beginning of the show, you know I am super excited about this guest coming up on June 8th, Saturday, June 8th, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will have with us Mark Valencia from Self-Sufficient Me. Mark has been one of my favorite channels, one of my favorite people for many years. I mean, well over 10 years I've been following Mark and what he's done since he was a small little YouTube channel like ourselves, all the way to being one of the biggest gardening YouTube channels in the world. And I think and I do believe he was the first gardener to hit 1 million subscribers on his channel. And he's definitely well on his way towards 3 million subscribers now. So it's going to be just awesome to talk with Mark on June 8th. And one of the cool things too, a lot of our big guests that we've had on our show, we've had some, what I like to call YouTube millionaires. And I mean by millionaires, a million subscriber guests. We've had a couple of those on the show already, but we always have done them in pre-recorded interviews, and Mark is going to join with us live for this show. He's going to be here live with us, so definitely join with us for that show. You're going to want to mark it on your calendars. You're going to want to bring your questions for Mark and for this really fun interview. It's going to be really great. One of the things too, I guess I'll also warn you about this show, we will be moving that show up an hour, so we will be up an hour from what we normally do. So that show will be at noon Pacific time. So definitely mark that. It's gonna be noon on June 8th. We'll have Mark joining with us live on the show. And how cool for him too. And I'll just mention this about him showing up live for us too, which is great. We are moving it up an hour in order to make sure, because he was even willing to do it. But I was like, I'm going to give you at least an hour. We can do this. This is special that you're showing up for the show, but we'll move it up an hour. But for Mark, he's going to be joining us from the future, basically. He is in Australia, so for him, for us it's gonna be noon Pacific time here in the States, but for him it's going to be Sunday at 5 a.m. in the morning. So he's going to be joining from us Sunday at 5 a.m. in the morning to be live with us. So it's going to be really awesome, really special show for us. And I hope all of you come and join with us. It's going to be really, really great. So, all right, if you are joining with us here and you're still with us and you haven't already, definitely hit that like button, click the thumbs up for us, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell notification to be notified of all of our upcoming episodes, and definitely be sure to share with all of your garden friends out there and let them know about our Let's Get Growing show and all of these awesome, amazing guests like Vikram we had today, and Alexis, as well as Scott coming up next week, and for sure Mark next week. We've got some amazing people right here on our show each and every Saturday and Sunday, so definitely share with all your friends. And like I mentioned also earlier, drop in comments, especially for those of you watching the replay, or if you're joining with us late and you're going to go back and watch the show from the beginning, jump into that comment section, leave some comments, go join with our guests, subscribe and check out their content as well, and jump in the comments and leave them some comments and let them know that you found them right here on the Let's Get Growing show. And so much, really great show today. Thank you all so much for joining with us here, and I'll see all of you tomorrow, Sunday, 11 a.m. And if not, I'll see you next Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. We'll see you.